Hey Facebook friends, it's Marianne. I just wanted to talk to you guys in this beautiful place. I'm obviously in Basque country. I will not try and pronounce the way they do, but I will put the name here so that you all can read it, because if I try and pronounce it, I will destroy it. But anyway, I want you to see how beautiful this view is. And if you look in the distance and you see the mountains in the distance, that's the Pyrenees, that's where France is. The Basque are beautiful people. They are unique people, not only in terms of the fact that they're one of the strongestly defined, still very proud indigenous Caucasian communities in the world. They actually have autonomy, which is kind of similar to the way the reservation system works in the United States for Native Americans. They have their own language, they have their own spiritual traditions. Their goddess's name is Mari, M-A-R-I. They are a beautiful people, and I wanted to educate some of you because I know some of you have not meant to be derogatory, but I've heard more than once people say, oh, I thought all white people were civilized. We don't have any more indigenous people. Though if you are originally where your ancestors were and you're still living there, you're indigenous. But putting that joking obvious thing aside, the Basque are unique in that they have their language, they have their original spiritual traditions uninterrupted from Christianity. They fought very hard for that, although many of them, I would almost say the majority of them, have blended Christianity in with the original Basque traditions. They have a beautiful oral history. If any of you want to learn more, my friend Andres Corbin-Athan has written extensively on this, as well as on the Sami, as well as on the Cornish and the Gaelic and Celtic, any indigenous Caucasian community. Andres is very much an expert of. He was in charge of the indigenous arm of the Department of World Religions for many years. So I encourage you to check out his work, and I'll put his name here so you guys can look him up if you're curious about that. But one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you about this is because this beautiful land has a history that we need to really pay attention to and learn from today. The Basque people, because they're unique, and they are very unique from many other kinds of people, and that while all of us are Homo sapiens sapiens today, sapien meaning knowledge, hominid obviously walking upright person, but the Homo sapien mingled with the Neanderthal, and the combination gave us the Homo sapien sapien. And what happened is that there are about 7 different hominid species that all combine in various ways, and that's why you have some of us Homo sapiens sapiens today that are shorter than others, taller than others, because we all have various degrees of each in us. However, here in the Basque area, one of the unique things they got from having probably more of the Neanderthal DNA than many other Homo sapiens sapien groups is they have an incredibly high intelligence. This has led them to make incredible gifts to the rest of our species over time. High achieving people, remarkable people that have often led our species in brilliant ways. Especially, we just got to go see the Maritime Museum yesterday. The achievements they did are just in many ways unparalleled. So a lot of stuff on that. But one of the reasons why I wanted to share stuff with you about them is because they're also people who have suffered greatly. They fought very hard to earn the legal autonomy they have within Spain now, and they're fighting still within the EU to have even more autonomy and get more of kind of a reservation kind of system like the Sami have. The Sami are the indigenous people that look like Joshua. They're tall, blonde, blue-eyed, and live up in Norway, Sweden, Denmark area. But anyway, yeah, for those that are curious, yes, the Cornish, yes, the Welsh, yes, the Gaelic, the Celtic. There are many other indigenous Caucasian communities that still exist today and throughout Europe. And many of them still have their traditional songs and their histories. And many of them suffered deeply for the same kind of tactics underneath the Inquisition, underneath different rulerships of different countries, long before America was even discovered. So I like to tell my indigenous friends that if you wonder why such and such happened to you in Africa, in Asia, in the Americas, in India, do know that the Europeans didn't do anything to you that they did not already do to their own indigenous traditions themselves. That was done. The witch trials, the burnings, all sorts of stuff. As I've shared with some of you, we were in an area of France where we got to go and see the Cathars. Now, they were a religious tradition that believed that Jesus was not the Son of God, that he was an avatar, a very spiritual man, and that walked this earth and was a spiritual teacher, and they also believed he taught reincarnation. And for those understandings, they were killed and very much eradicated. This trip has been a beautiful trip, but it's largely been designed by Joshua, who wanted to learn more about the Cathars because he's felt a very strong sense of resonating with them in their story. So we've been kind of following their trail where they went and then came into the Basque area, and there is a bit of a crossover. The Basque have standing stone structures very similar to what you think of as Stonehenge. In fact, some people wonder if they were part of building Stonehenge a long time ago. Who knows? There's a lot of questions. There's a Gaelic area as well, around, in northern Spain as well. So a lot of people that think that's only Irish. Nope, that's also here. Anyway, sharing some of this history with you because we human beings, we silly Homo sapiens, have had a way of hating the different, resenting the different, not learning from, not working with. And yet you can see for yourself in this beautiful place that when differences are allowed to occur and people are allowed to express themselves, the incredible innovations and beauty that arise. And I really think that here in the United States, we need to pay attention to that because right now we have something that is really despicable going on. There's a man who I have great respect, and many of you who are close friends of mine know I've spoken about this before. Senator John McCain was someone that I really respected deeply. And I first really started learning more about him because back when Bush was in charge of the state of Texas, there was actual talk among people about making it illegal for interracial adoption to occur and for adoption to occur among gay parents. And my father, this is back when I was in high school, he had played a role. And I don't know the depth of it because I was all stuck in my own high school world. But I know that he played a role in fighting that. And there were people that were resentful of the fact that he did that. And so they tried to pass really disgusting rumors that he had had an affair. I was actually his illegitimate child that he got, blah, 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 blah. Well, the same people that did that kind of thing and they were doing that because they didn't like the fact that he was fighting for interracial adoption. And he didn't get involved in politics very much. He got involved in human rights. In fact, Dad tried to keep a 10-foot pole between him and politics as much as possible. But he said that all of us have to fight for human rights. And he's a large part of why I fight so passionately for it today. But the same people that decide to instigate that kind of whisper-style campaign did that with John McCain, because John McCain also adopted interracially. He has a black child, a daughter, who he was very proud of. And when he adopted her, people started trying to do the same kind of smear tactics. And John McCain fought and said, no, I adopted this child, and I love her as much as anyone else, any other child by blood. And he made a point of that. And because he made such a point of that and fought some of the same people that had tried to do that kind of thing with my dad, I really started relating to him, and I really appreciated him because I realized he was a man of dignity, he's a man of honor, he's a man of integrity, and he cared about what was right, and he put integrity and ethics before politics. And I started watching him, and I started back then because I wanted to understand who is this man that was facing off some of the same kind of stuff my dad faced off. And I will speak very directly with you that the kind of stuff that was coming out was because some people had such a hard time believing that the social archetype of a powerful white man could have it within themselves, the love and heart big enough to not care about race enough to love someone other. Now, I don't know any of you who've read some of the recent articles that have come out both in the Atlantic, and I wish I could remember what the other one is. I think it might have also been the Atlantic. And they were talking about what is happening in our nation right now between those who feel that Trump is corrupt and those who feel that the progressives are corrupt. And they said it's a difference in what we define corruption. That corruption according to the law is one thing, corruption according to culture is another thing. And that progressives are concerned about corruption as defined by the law, and conservatives are concerned about what they perceive as corruption based on culture. And what they mean by culture is power-based. They don't want to see things change the way things have been in terms of what defines what's powerful. And right now, we have the archetype of a white older man as being powerful. And we believe that since ancient times, that archetype can go out and have a little something on the side, pay off people here, do that. We're comfortable with that kind of corruption. But when we start looking at, things such as going back into the 1950s, I don't know if you all saw this, there was a young boy who was 14 who was electrocuted at 14 in an electric chair for having been accused of killing some, 2 little girls. And just recently they've been able to prove that he was actually innocent, but he was black, and therefore people were quick to judge. And people were pointing at that and saying, talking about how people were so quick because the idea in our society was, what is the biggest thing wrong that people could do is to be someone of a color that it could cause a problem or an issue for someone who is white. And anything that does that turns our perceived power structures on their head and is therefore seen as a social corruption. So when we start understanding that these are old archetypes that we have not yet grown out of, then we start understanding other things, such as, and I shared this when I was talking to some people in London. Recently I was able to speak there to the Global Woman Group, and I explained to some of the women, and this is a hard truth, and I wish it were not true, but it's very true when it comes to women public speaking and women in leadership. And that is that if you want to be a woman of power, you must tie what you care about to a higher purpose. You cannot just be about your own ambition, or else you will be resented. And that is not fair. I know it's not fair, but it's true. And you go all the way back to Hatshepsut when she was leader of the one woman pharaoh that led Egypt for ages. She had to tie herself to the higher purpose of bringing the divine to the earth. She had to dress in drag like a man. When you look at Queen Elizabeth, she said she was married to England, and that's the only way she could remain a virgin queen, remain a queen that was not underneath the control of a king. Women always have to tie themselves to a higher purpose. Regardless of how you feel about politics, where Hillary went wrong sociologically is she was bold enough to go out there and say, I'm ambitious and I want it for ambition's sake. Unfortunately, that's just not going to fly in these modern times. Why? Because it turns our social constructs on their head. And as an organizational psychologist, I can tell you we can wish the land was different, we can wish reality was different, but if you want to be strategic and you want to succeed, you have to look at reality and you have to strategize and react for what it is. So when we start looking at these things, we start understanding now, what is the difference between social corruption, what we think sociologically, social corruption, and real legal corruption? And which are we going to be as a nation? Are we going to be like McCain and say, you know what, we may have always done it this way, we may have always been this way, but that way was wrong, and I'm going to stand for this. I'm not going to allow my ethics and morals and integrity to be corrupted by a social construct that is outdated, outmoded, and actually does not resonate with my morals. Will we be strong enough to do that? Or will we be like people in the past, like you see in this Basque area, where the Spanish didn't like them because they spoke differently, they looked different, they acted different, they did this different, that different, and you have, or what happened to the Cathars, or people were ostracized because they had a different interpretation of an ancient spiritual leader. We have the opportunity now, this day and age, and I would even say the responsibility, to look with direct insight and take the time to educate ourselves. Difference doesn't mean corruption. Change and evolution does not mean bad. In fact, it can be opportunity. And for those of you that are scared of changing, and I keep hearing people say, America's face is changing, and what they mean is people are looking less like my husband Joshua, blonde and blue-eyed, and more like me, brown and black hair. But it doesn't have to be either or. When Josh and I announced that we were getting married, I had my mom's brother, my Uncle Frank, said to me, I'm okay with it as long as you don't have children, because I don't want to see the DNA corrupted. And we didn't want children because we knew we wanted our lives to be dedicated to humanity, and that would mean sometimes putting ourselves in dangerous situations that wouldn't be fair to a child. But it made me very sad. And thankfully, that uncle's come around and said if you'd had children, they'd be wonderful. But, you know, it's going to be a matter of mingling. It's going to be a matter of changing. And here in the Basque country, it's a beautiful example of that, because now you have people that were uniquely Basque and people that were uniquely Iberian and Spanish, and they've mixed into what they are today. And you have an incredibly gorgeous culture, incredible high achievements, incredible art. America, that's in our future. Now, we can get there bloody, or we can learn from what's happened in the past. We can get there ostracizing those who are different, like we've done time and time again when we used to say that the Chinese were not allowed to be educated up until the 1800s. Or we can try and skip that. We can get there by creating camps like we stuck the Japanese in. Or we can get there past that. We can tear down the camps that ISIS is trying to build now, these austere camps. We can get there by trying to slow change, by binding people literally in fetters like they did in the ancient medieval times, by bringing back the rap like they're trying to do with ICE now and tying people's necks to their feet and their arms behind them, which causes great pain. But no matter of fetters will tie progress. You can wrap up as many people as you want, and it will not stop the world from changing. Evolution is natural. Evolution occurs. And if you can take a look at what's happening here in the Basque area and how beautiful it is, as the Iberians and the Basque and the Gaelics who came in, all these other people who have mixed and mingled, and now people from Africa that the Moors brought. I mean, how they mixed and mingled. And we can take a look at how far they came and what kind of beautiful country they built. And we can learn from that as we start looking at the palette of colors that make up humanity that are in every single one of our communities. And we can get there without the bloody fight. And we can get there with compassion. And we can get there with enough space and understanding that we can get the best out of each other. I don't know if any of you have been to some Pakistani restaurants in Dallas, but they're delicious. And if you like Spanish food, I mean, if you like Tex-Mex, if you like Indian food, you're going to love Pakistani food. I don't know if any of you have gone out to the Greek food festival, but you should. I don't know. But you guys really need to try and taste each other's food, see each other's music, art, experience each other's humanity, and get past the ugliness. Because what ugliness is what Trump is doing right now by flying the flag on the White House, full mast, not half-mast, because he disagreed with a man. And if we're in a country where two men, both white, both Republican, can disagree, and based on that disagreement, it got so ugly that the president refuses to acknowledge a man who is a war hero, then we're in a lot of trouble, because that's just differences of ideals. Differences of ideals and not race is what I told you about with the Cathars. But we have a lot more differences than that. And I want to take a look at what McCain is demonstrating with his funeral. He's having both Obama and Bush speak at his funeral. He wanted one of the last messages to our country to be Republican and Democrat coming together and addressing the nation as a whole, and addressing the people as a community of differences that could learn to work and live together. This is the man who, like my father, adopted a child of a different race because he saw beauty in that person, the potential of that person. This is a man who saw the America that I see, and I know many of you see. And I think that we have a message here. Do you want to learn a bloody way, like had to happen here in the Basque area in Spain? Or do we want to learn from the mistakes of the past? America, we're such a young country, but we come from ancient roots. The Native Americans were ancient. Many of the people that came over to our country came from older ancient cultures. We can learn from the mistakes they made, build on them, and not have to go through the horrors that are trying to come back. And they are horrors. When you hear about wrapping tiny children up in this horrible thing called the wrap, when you hear about these camps that are being built, they're still being built. When you hear about this wall that's being built on the border, or they're trying to build, and they're trying to build it straight through Native American graveyards, but most importantly, and I mean no disrespect to the Native Americans, but the butterfly sanctuary that's there, which was built by Republican farmers who realized after Monsanto's travesty of doing crops up with genetically manipulating them to have poison in them, they realized, oops, we're accidentally also not just killing off the insects we're trying to get rid of, or killing off the monarchs, which we rely on to do these crops, and we're going to have a long way ahead to try and rebuild that population. So it's either all of us human beings going out with paintbrushes trying to pretend to be bees and butterflies, or we got to try and help their populations. And it was because of the Republican farmers, that butterfly sanctuary was built. And it took, I think, about 15 years to get to where it is starting to actually make an impact in helping their crops get to back where they are. And it's not just our crops, because those butterflies, the monarchs, go through all the way through North America down to Mexico. So, when we start understanding, that was a conservative Republican group that wanted that there. And that wall is going out of its way to go through that butterfly sanctuary. And that can actually harm our sanctuary. Not only that, it's going to be going through another area which protects wild cats and other predators. And the reason why those are important is because our farmers are dealing with wild pigs, which are destroying many of the farms. We need those predators. We need those butterflies. We need those bees. And the farmers, who are very conservative, many of them voted for Trump, so don't get all on to me, Trumpettes. These are people that voted the way you did. They want that sanctuary. These are things that are happening that are ridiculous in our country, and they're being made politicized into either or. Trump even referred to those farmers and the butterfly sanctuaries, bleeding heart liberal, stupid liberal. You know what? They're not. They're people like you and me. And we rely on them. We rely on them to eat the fruit that we want to eat on the table. Point is, we're all in this together. So let's take a look at what McCain is doing. Let's take a look at ancient history in the Bosque area and the Cathar area. Let's look at what ICE is doing with the rap. Let's look at those sanctuaries. Let's listen to the people that are fighting down there. And let's try and understand. Juan Montius, hats off to you. I know you're fighting the good fight down there on the border to protect those sanctuaries, protect the interests of the indigenous people who are intimately connected with the farmers and with our land. And unfortunately, Texas is right in the heart of it. And of course, Six Flags Over Texas, Spain played a role in that. So we need to look at our ancient past, our Native American past, and at all the past and the stories that were told by each of those countries' Six Flags. What did the France and the Cathars have to tell us? What does Spain and the Basque have to tell us? What do all these ancient mistakes have to tell us today? What can we learn, and how can we do better? I'm not going to say I have all the answers, but I'm going to say that the way McCain is going out of this world is with grace and dignity, and demonstrating to us one way to do it. His family will be there. It will be an interracial family demonstrating an interracial adoption. It will be a Republican and a Democrat president standing side by side and talking about how our nation can work together. And all will be honoring a man that was capable of putting integrity and ethics before politics, which is something all of us need to learn. And it's something that history tells us. Once you can learn that lesson, it can be quite beautiful, can't it?